going to air it out. Down the field. Catch and a touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
College Football Pick'em here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. Week 5 of the college football season, and as always, we are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. We're on a hot streak, folks. That's right, a hot streak. Every Saturday morning, I've been giving you my picks and my analysis on the upcoming games in college football after a relatively decent start. 3-2 first week, and then we're 3-2 the next week, so we're 6-4 through 2 weeks. Back-to-back weeks, folks. We go 5-0 and 4-1, now 15-5 on the season through 4 weeks, heading into a pivotal week 5. But so far, we are plenty in the green, winning plenty of money throughout this college football season. And this week, hopefully, is no exception, with some other great games on the docket. And that includes my Scarlet Knights against the Ohio State Buckeyes later today as well. Now, granted, that's one of the games that's not going to be in our pick segment later, but we will talk about it at some point as well. We have 5-pack of picks coming up later in the show, but we have to dive in first to some stuff that happened last week and then leading into more game preview today. But I do want to start with Ole Miss and Alabama, because that is a game we are not going to dive into from a spread, or at least pick, I should say. I mean, of course, we will always give you the line on games like that, especially. But Ole Miss and Alabama is the game of the week. This is 3:30 today, CBS. It's in Alabama. You have the both teams are undefeated. You have number 1 Alabama, just looks unstoppable week in, week out. But now you have Ole Miss, who showed you something last year. And now this is a game where they could really turn the college football season upside down, make it go backwards, sideways, long ways, and slant ways, and as the great Gene Wilder once said. You look at this game. It's only week 5, so let's not say the entire season is going to be over for Alabama if they happen to lose this game, because of course Alabama can still get into the playoff with 1 loss. And again, I know they're in the same division as Ole Miss, so Ole Miss would certainly have the advantage, and they would have the tiebreaker over Bama in an upset situation here. But this is a game that would totally match what's been going on with college football this year if Ole Miss should win. Now, right now, the line as we speak is 14.5 for Alabama. Over-under set at 79. So Vegas expects this game to be very, very high scoring, which, I do too. You have 2 Heisman candidate quarterbacks right now in Bryce Young for Alabama and Matt Corral over at Ole Miss. Bama just has weapons upon weapons upon weapons, and Corral is playing outstanding football once again under Lane Kiffin. And we'll be talking about Lane Kiffin as we move throughout this segment. But when I mention how college football can be absolutely turned upside down this season, I mean it. Because so far it has, aside from the Alabamas of the world. You look at what happened to Clemson. They lost to NC State. They're now 2-2, and somehow, some way, they are still ranked in both polls. They're number 25 in the AP, but they're 19 in the coaches poll. They are 2-2. Let me remind you, folks, of your top 6 right now. You know how when the college football playoff rankings start coming out later in the fall, they always reveal. They reveal them all, but they tease the top 6 because it's the top 4 that are in, the first 2 that are out. Let me remind you of what the AP poll said this week for the top 6. Number 6, Oklahoma. Number 5, Iowa. Number 4, Penn State. Number 3, Oregon. Number 2, Georgia. And number 1, Alabama. Doesn't that already seem a little weird? The usual years, or at least the past couple of years, 2, 3, even 4 seasons, you always had Alabama. Okay, Alabama the exception, but you always had after Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. Always. No Pac-12. Those four. And then some of the other teams that I've mentioned, or that I can mention, behind the top six are lingering. Notre Dame, there you go. Notre Dame last year and twice overall. They're number 9. They're moving up, though. Don't get me wrong. They're moving up. And they're 4-0. But we're seeing more parity in college football this year. Because out of the top 10 teams right now, only 9 of them are still undefeated. Florida is number 10 in the country, and they're 3-1. Same goes for Ohio State right behind them at number 11. Now, granted, you have, and I know it's only through the first third of the season, and you do have some undefeated teams behind Ohio State like Ole Miss, BYU, and Michigan within the top 15. Texas A&M, by the way, 3-1. And everyone thought Texas A&M was going to be a great challenger to Alabama again this year. It very well could be. But they lost to Arkansas, who, by the way, is 4-0, number 8 in the country. Arkansas, folks. I know it's the SEC, but Arkansas. If we were talking SEC, we would think Alabama, Georgia, or Florida, or Texas A&M, I guess, within this competition here for the top 4. There's new schools near the top. That's been the method of this college football madness through the first few weeks, through the first month. And you mean to tell me it wouldn't be so 2021? So it would be just like the 2021 season that Ole Miss can't beat Alabama. They absolutely can beat Alabama. Now, let me pump the brakes real quick. I don't think they're going to beat Alabama today. But I would not rule it out. You can't rule anything out this year. This would be a game, even in the same exact scenario, number 1 versus number 12, last year, where I would say 14.5, take Alabama and then double that. They're going to beat them by 28. Maybe not Ole Miss. Just because the game was a shootout last year and it was close. My point remains. I would not even have a second thought about picking Alabama, either with the points or just picking them outright, if we're just going to pick them straight up on the money line, without the line. I would have no hesitation picking Alabama. This year I kind of do with Ole Miss. And based on what's happened throughout the season so far. Now, it's in Tuscaloosa, so that obviously helps a lot. It's not the confines of Ole Miss's home stadium. But I'll tell you what, college football is being turned upside down as we speak, and it's a refreshing look at the sport after what we've seen over the past few years. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy it every year. The playoff every year has been, at least to me, I know there's been some duds, but, at the very end, you do get some pretty good championship games. We've seen some big-time surprises in the playoffs as well. We've seen a lot of great games leading up to the postseason as well. But, you look at last year compared to what this year could be. Ohio State blows out Clemson, right? Alabama just ran the table with, they ran over Notre Dame, whatever. Ohio State and Clemson played for what it was worth, an entertaining game until Ohio State eventually really pulled away and ended up blowing them out. But it was entertaining. Because you're like, wow, Clemson's going down. We knew Ohio State was good. They only played 6 games this year in the COVID year. They're not going to beat Clemson. Justin Fields lit them up. Six touchdowns. You're like, okay, Alabama, Ohio State, championship game. Maybe Ohio State is that good. They can knock them off. Back and forth a little bit, and then Alabama pulls away, and they blow them out. So last year was a little weird. But, it stayed, it kept the status quo. The playoff did what it was supposed to do. Get the best team to the top. And it did. But again, it was Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Notre Dame. This year, Alabama, Georgia. Don't forget, those two teams within the same conference met in the championship game just a few years ago. Out of the playoff. Okay, Alabama, Georgia. Oregon made the playoff before, but only the first one. That seemed like a lifetime ago. Marcus Mariota was still the quarterback. Penn State never made the playoff. Arguably should have back in 2016. 2016 or 17. The year they won the Big Ten, but they had 2 losses. Iowa, they were on the doorstep a handful of years ago when Michigan State won the Big Ten and ended up making the playoff. Okay, Oklahoma, number 6. We get it. They've been in before. Cincinnati. I didn't even talk about Cincinnati yet. They're number 7 already. And they play number 9 Notre Dame today. Now, if they win, you want to talk about putting the rankings upside down. That would be a top 10 win for Cincinnati. They would probably jump Oklahoma. And again, Oklahoma is undefeated. I understand that. But they have not played. They're not playing Texas till next week. So a win this week would not really do anything for them unless teams above them lost. But I would say if Cincinnati beats number 9 Notre Dame, they're going to jump at least Oklahoma. And heck, they might even jump Iowa. Cincinnati is going to move up. Florida's still in the mix down there. They still have to play Georgia. Ohio State can't rule them out. They lost to Oregon, but if they beat Penn State, run the table. Ohio State's back in the mix. But again, then it brings us back to Ole Miss at number 12. There's more parity in college football this year. You just love to see it. As far as the actual game on the field between Alabama and Ole Miss, again, I'm a fan of the Crimson Tide once again, as, well, I would say a lot of experts are. I just don't see them losing again. And now I did say just a few moments ago that this could be a game they drop. But Nick Saban has never lost to an assistant. He still has that going for him. This team edged out Ole Miss last year on the road. Now it's in Tuscaloosa. I know it's a different year. Both teams are going to be better. Arguably, of course. But I look at the rest of Alabama's schedule, right? I see at Texas A&M next week. Now, that game is not as big. It's a big game on paper. But it's not as difficult as it was supposed to be made out because Haynes King's not at quarterback. And we've seen Texas A&M already struggle without their starting quarterback. At Mississippi State, that's a win. Home against Tennessee, home against LSU, win. Mexico State, win. Then we get to the final 2. I would, as long as they get by Ole Miss today, which I do think they will, I fully expect Alabama to be 10-0, going up against Arkansas at home, and then at Auburn. Now, if Arkansas continues at this pace, then that's going to be one of the best games in November. And then Alabama has to play the Iron Bowl. So there is the next time I will say, okay, maybe Alabama will be turned upside down. Such is the nature of the 2021 season so far. But other than that, I don't see them losing. This game on paper features Alabama, Ole Miss, by the way. 2 quarterbacks that are going to be firmly in the Heisman mix at this pace. And we will dive into some updated Heisman odds in our next segment, of course. Our little top 10 as we break that down. But I'm looking at these 2 quarterbacks on paper, right? So Matt Corral's only played 3 games compared to Young's played 4. So the stats might be a little bit skewed when I say them out loud, but based on the way Corral's played over the first 3 games, I just want to you need to realize how impressive this is. 66 of 96, 997 yards, and 9 touchdowns. That's Matt Corral's stat line in 3 games. Bryce Young, as a freshman quarterback, by the way, and last year didn't count. It was a free year, so he technically is still a true freshman. Bryce Young is 88 of 122 for 1,124 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Corral's not thrown a pick yet. Young is dialing it up. And guess who his leading receiver is? He's able to spread the ball out, by the way, too. Jameson Williams, a transfer from Ohio State. How ironic. A guy who played against Alabama last year, didn't really crack the full-time starting lineup with that loaded receiver room, comes to Alabama, is their best kick returner, and is their leading receiver through 1 month. It pays to be Alabama. This is what I mean by them being a factory and them being fine. They'll get talent from anywhere. They get transfers from Ohio State. On paper, I'm still taking Matt Corral. He's the veteran. As the better quarterback, at least. But since this game is on the road for Ole Miss, it's tough. It's tough to pick because Alabama is nearly unbeatable at home. And they're rolling once again. But this should be the game of the weekend. The 14.5, it's tough for me to take that for Alabama. I'm not making an official pick here. But I would probably lean Ole Miss to cover that. But Alabama's going to win this game outright. They just might not cover. Even ESPN's matchup predictor has this game 80% in favor of Alabama. 80.8 to be exact, 19.2 for Ole Miss. So this goes to show you, for as good of a game that this can be, and it's a top 15 matchup, both teams undefeated early on, SEC play, Alabama is favored by that much, and they are predicted to win by 80% of the population, essentially. That's according to ESPN's FPI. Just fascinating. How about this? Total yards. This is why I think, again, you have to look at who they're playing. I mean, Ole Miss has played Louisville, App State, and Tulane. While Bama's played Miami, Mercer, Florida, and Southern Miss. Tough game of Florida. So they've already been battle tested. But Ole Miss is averaging 635 yards a game. 635. They're allowing 340, and Bama's averaging 465 a game and allowing 288. Points per game, 52, almost 53 for Ole Miss, and it's 46.5 for Alabama. Just expect a lot of points and a lot of fun in this game. I do want to switch gears real quick before we take a break. And it's about Clemson. Now, everyone's going to hit the panic button. What's wrong with Clemson? 2-2. All right, so, folks, their playoff hopes this year are done, obviously. They already have 2 losses, and they might lose again. Based on what they've done this year. All right, they lost to Georgia. Granted, that was Georgia, but they beat South Carolina State. They beat them up, whatever. But they barely beat Georgia Tech. And then they lost to NC State in the last 2 weeks. Boston College tonight is no picnic. They're undefeated. Boston College looking pretty good under Jeff Hafley. They could very well lose tonight. At Syracuse, always a tough game for them for some reason. I think they would win that. But, folks, this team could be 3-3 after the first 6 games. And then they have to go at Pitt, which is getting a career performance out of Kenny Pickett right now at quarterback. They could lose that. This team could be 3-4. Florida State, they should win. Louisville, I probably expect them to win. So we're talking 5-4 with 3 games left. UConn, they're going to win 6-4. Wake Forest, the way they've played right now, is no picnic. But it's at home. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say 7-4 now for Clemson. So Clemson, to me, could very easily be, they're 2-2 right now. They could very easily be 7-4 going into the South Carolina game at the end of the year. On the road. And who knows what's going to happen. They're probably going to win, to be honest with you. They just have more talent on paper, so we're probably thinking an 8-4 season for Clemson this year, which, for most schools is, heck, for my Rutgers Scarlet Knights, hey, 8-4 season, you're damn right I'll take that. 8-4 for Clemson. Oh, my God. It's the end. The end of the dynasty. Well, folks, Alabama is a dynasty. Clemson's a dynasty light. They won 2 championships, don't get me wrong. They've won 2 championships under Dabo. They've been in 2 others under Dabo. So they were hanging around for a long time. They're not dynasty. Alabama's a dynasty because that team could win a championship every single year. Clemson's now in that first year where they're like, crap, we might not win the title this year, but instead of going 10-2, with maybe an upset loss and that we're going to be still a top 10 team, or 11-1 and we drop 1 game, but we're on the cusp of the playoff or in the playoff, and then we're just going to lose the semifinal game. This team is not they're bottoming out, but they're like, oh my God, what is going on? Now, because of the talent they had, they could very well turn it around and they could finish 10-2. Don't get me wrong, but still miss the playoff. They could still win the ACC. But the way it looks right now, folks, DJ Uyunglele is struggling, filling in for Trevor Lawrence. The offensive line's getting beat up. They just lost a couple more defenders. I believe Brian Reese was next. He's out. I think he's out for the season. And their true freshman running back, Will Shipley, who was big-time recruit, 5-star running back, he's out for quite a while. Not for the season, but he's out for a while. I mean, so they're losing guys left and right. Dabo's got to put a Band-Aid on this thing right now and get through the season now. 8 more games. All this happened in the first 4 games. It's not looking good for Clemson. Not looking good. But you can't tell me, you can't just look at me in the eye and say it's done for Clemson. Dabo had a great run. He's done. It's just going to be, 8 to 10 win seasons here from here on out. Maybe the occasional ACC title and never return to the playoff or a championship game. Well, let's reel it in a little bit. Slow down. I don't think it's going to be it's not totally like that. They're just having a down. They're just going to have a down year for their standards. They could still, and like I said, I think that just based on paper right now, the way I just broke down the schedule, I do see an 8-4 season to conclude the season. They could very well be 9-3 or 10-2. 10-2 would require them winning 8 in a row, but would I be shocked if they won 8 in a row or if they finished 9-3? No. Heck, 8-4 would be a nice little rebound after a 2-2 start. That's still 6-2 in your final 8 games. It's not Clemson's standard over the past handful of years, since the playoff. But it's something. It'd be a more positive end of the season. And DJU is not going anywhere. He's not jumping to the NFL. He will be back next year. And you retool for next year. Development with that offensive line, get some additional 5-star recruits in, and they'll be back to normal next year. Because Dabo is one heck of a coach. So don't panic on. Don't put the death sentence on Clemson just yet. Maybe for this year as a contender. Probably this year for a contender, as a contender. But this reign of success is not quite over for Dabo Swinney. All right, we're going to step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we'll start breaking down some of the Heisman odds after Week 4. After the first month, we'll reevaluate the picture at the moment. And then, of course, later in the show, we'll dive into my 5-pack of picks, 15-5 on the season. Got a fresh 5 for you. Try to go 5-0 once again. Can we hit that 20 mark level or threshold through 5 weeks? Oh, boy, wouldn't that be something? Keep it locked here. It's College Football Pick'em right on AM 1490, Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Nick Kosko with you, as always, bringing you up to 9 a.m. on this cool and crisp Saturday in October. I almost forgot to mention, folks, it's October already. Can you believe that? Just the other day I was thinking about the summer, and it was just, the summer was flying by, and then once we got to September, I'm like, oh, okay, football's back, college football's back, the NFL will be back just in another week, and, all right, this is nice. College football kickoff, it's a normal season, after last year's, COVID nonsense, and you look at full stadiums, it's like, oh my gosh, this is the fall we've been waiting for. I'm so glad to be back. And then all of a sudden, folks, you have football out the wazoo, high school, college, and pro. But it's still hot out, right? September's still hot, and all of a sudden you're looking out the window, and you're like, oh, it's sunny out. You step outside. Ooh, it's crisp. It's a nice little 62 this morning. Now these mornings, folks, it's October. These mornings are starting to get, it's that 55 in the morning. I mean, you still sometimes some of these days can still get to, 68, 72 during the day. But it's like, ooh, that 55 is out. That cool, crisp chill is in the air in the morning. That's how you know it is prime time football season. Speaking of now prime time football season, we have to talk about the Heisman odds after Week 4. All right, so we broke it down on 247sports.com from our friends at the Caesars Sportsbook. So there are 10 on this list based on the odds, and there are 2. And I've already mentioned 2 of these guys a lot back in that first segment regarding who is in the running now for the Heisman Trophy, or at least who is the current favorite or favorites. We're going to go plural there. All right, so we'll start at the bottom. And when I say bottom, I mean this is the top 10. And there are 5 guys basically tied for 6th here in terms of the Heisman odds. They all have the same chance at the moment. All at plus 4,000 if you still want to put some money on it. And don't worry, folks, there are 2 quarterbacks in this list, so it might not be such a bad bet based on their production so far. All right, Trevion Henderson, Ohio State freshman running back. Now, I know. It's a quarterback award aside from, last year Devontae Smith won it as a wide receiver. So, running back. There's 2 running backs right here. Trevion Henderson from Ohio State and C.J. Verdell of Oregon. Now, if I was going to put some money on the long shot odds here at the bottom of the top 10, I would lean towards Henderson only because of the tear he is on. And in the end, he might have to end up carrying that offense a little bit more than quarterback C.J. Stroud, who, by the way, is on this list as well at plus 4,000, alongside, of course, Fresno State quarterback Jake Haener and Michigan State running back Kenneth Walker III. So we have 1, 2, 3. I just mentioned 3 running backs right now in the top 10, Henderson, Verdell, and Walker. Now, out of all those guys, I would pick Walker if I'm going to pick a running back. Walker from Michigan State is absolutely tearing it up, and since he transferred in from Wake Forest, he has been unstoppable. And again, Michigan State and Ohio State are similar in this way. They have a dominant running back who is probably the focal point of the offense, despite the fact that both of their quarterbacks are lighting it up on the stat sheet, at least, through the air. Now, Peyton Thorne, Michigan State, I did not think he was going to be this good. Frankly, I didn't think he was going to beat out Temple transfer Anthony Russo for the starting quarterback job this fall. But he did, and he's lighting it up. So just goes to show you, what do I know about preseason football? And then you look at C.J. Stroud, who I just mentioned is also on this top 10 list at plus 4,000, along with Walker, Haener, Verdell, and Henderson. Stroud, he is in Ryan Day's offense, so I have a lot of confidence that he's going to keep, not that he has been struggling, but, he's been a little inconsistent, but also, don't forget, he has sky-high expectations because it is Ohio State, it is Ryan Day's offense, and he is coming in right after Justin Fields, who was, statistically, the way he played over the last 2 years, he probably is the best quarterback in school history, at least right up there. I'd have to really break down that list, but you can't tell me there's many guys better than Fields in Ohio State history. So yeah, there's a lot of expectations. But heck, even Rutgers coach Greg Schiano, who Ohio State plays today at 3:30 in Piscataway, said that this guy is pretty darn good, and they have to prepare for him. But again, that's all Ohio State quarterbacks. Kyle McCord filled in for Stroud last week due to injury. They played Akron, but he played pretty darn well, and even Jack Miller got some reps. And don't forget, Quinn Ewers, he was supposed to be in high school, skipped the rest of his senior year to come into Ohio State early. I don't know if and when we're ever going to see him this season, but it just goes to show you that Ohio State's offense is built for these elite quarterbacks, and you're going to get stellar play out of them. But on the flip side of that, because he's not a guy like Justin Fields, and he doesn't run the ball like Fields does, that's why I turn around and say, if you're going to take an Ohio State Buckeye right now out of this top 10 in the odds, I would lean towards Trevion Henderson, because this guy can do it all. This guy was hyped up coming into the season as a true freshman back. He already broke Archie Griffin's true freshman record for most rushing yards in a single game as a freshman, not overall, because that was done by Trey Sermon in the Big Ten Championship game last year. So I would lean towards Henderson. He's killing it on the ground, and he can also help out Stroud in the passing game as well. Verdell, long shot odds, so I wouldn't quite place the money on him, only because who knows? Again, it's Oregon, and it's nothing against the Pac-12, but it is something against the Pac-12 at least. Because you have a guy like Jake Haener, who's from Fresno, the quarterback of Fresno State, leads the nation in passing yards right now. Not touchdowns, but at least passing yards. He'll get a little buzz, but I know they're ranked now, but they'd have to go undefeated, and he'd have to maintain his pace to be in the thick of the conversation. For Verdell, again, it goes back to this award's mainly a quarterback award as of late. So history's not on the side of guys like Verdell or Henderson, as I just mentioned, or even Walker, who I like out of all three of those running backs. History is not on their side. But if you're going to take a Buckeye, take Henderson. If you're going to take one of the running backs, I would take Walker. Because Verdell, while he's very good, I just think him playing in the Pac-12, some lesser competition in some sort of fashion, is going to hurt him in the end. At least with Kenneth Walker. The committee, and I'm going by what the Heisman voters are going to look at. If Kenneth Walker keeps up this pace for Michigan State, and again, as I mentioned, similar situation to Ohio State with the quarterback, Peyton Thorne lighting it up, but that offense runs through Kenneth Walker, and Peyton Thorne just managed to dice up 10 touchdowns. He has just under 1,000 yards this year as well, and they're 4-0 and they're ranked. But that offense runs through Walker. So when you look at Kenneth Walker, and if you're going to take a running back, you take him only because if he keeps the pace up and they keep winning. The Heisman voters are going to look at, wow, Michigan State beat Penn State, they beat Ohio State, they beat Michigan. Whoa, that's the vaunted Big Ten East. And Kenneth Walker is going to if you mean to tell me Kenneth Walker is going to have well over 1,000 yards this year, and he's going to have double-digit touchdowns, he's going to reel in a few balls for a couple hundred yards and maybe a couple more touchdowns, you mean to tell me this kid's not going to be, let's pump the brakes real quick. But you mean to tell me that if that's the situation, he's not going to get the most Heisman buzz out of all the running backs, and he's not going to be at least invited out of the top 4, top 5, however many they take this year. So through 4 games, so let's extrapolate now Kenneth Walker over a full season. So we're going to multiply everything by 3. So he has 554 yards right now, by the way. That puts him on pace for over 1,600 yards. 1,662 to be exact. He's on pace for 15 touchdowns on the ground. And in the receiving game, he only has 3 catches, which already ties his career high at Wake Forest per season. So he's not that utilized in the passing game, but he's still on pace for 3 receiving touchdowns and 9 catches. I bet you'll have more. My point is on the ground, carrying the offense on the ground like that. If you're knocking on the door of 1,700 yards on the ground, that's pretty darn impressive, and you should be getting Heisman buzz. Plus with 15 touchdowns, whoo boy. I bet you if he has those numbers, Michigan State's in the thick of things, and you're probably talking about either Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, or they came up just short. So I'm telling you, if you're looking for a long shot bet, it would not be bad to take Kenneth Walker. Now the top 5, and this is where we get interesting. JT Daniels plus 3,000. Now Daniels, not that it's a slow start for him at the moment, but Georgia is not. Again, once he came to that team last year, the offense, as I like to say all the time, finally came to the 21st century because they started they started bombing it downfield because they had a big arm quarterback who, showed a lot of promise as a freshman at USC back in 2018. The guy did throw for 2,600 yards in 11 games as a true freshman. And I know his touchdown interception ratio was 14-10, and he completed under 60% of his passes. We were like, okay, he's showing promise. And then tore his ACL. In the opener the very next year, and in comes Keaton Slovis. Out goes Daniels, goes to Georgia. But in the 4 games last year, 67%, over 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. Put that over a full 12-game season. We're talking nearly 3,700 yards, 30 touchdowns, and only 6 picks, and a completion percentage that is well over 65%. You mean to tell me this kid can't be in the Heisman conversation? He can be. He still has the odds for the reason, but he's 5th for a reason. Because through 3 games this year, they have not relied on him that much. Now we can through 3 games, we can, we like to extrapolate and project. So he's projected now after 3 games. Here's what he's projected for a full season. Yardage-wise, he has 567 right now. He's on pace for a little over 2,200 yards. That'd be lower than 2018 when he was a freshman at USC. He's on pace for 20 touchdowns and 6 picks. So he's not on pace of where he was last year. So that worries me. Now, could he turn it up? Absolutely. Could he be playing? Could he be doing this for an undefeated Georgia team going to the SEC title game against probably Alabama? Yes. That's going to help his case a lot. But for Daniels, who's on this pace now, which is behind his pace from last year, and it's a little bit ahead of his freshman year pace at USC, this kid has to be probably the most efficient quarterback in the country and get his team to the playoff with an SEC title if he's going to win the Heisman at this rate. So I'm not a fan. I mean, if he had bigger odds, in the plus 3,000, if he was plus 4,000 or if he was plus 5,000, a little bit higher, maybe I'd take that. But I'm not a fan of taking it right now for JT Daniels, despite him being smack in the middle of these odds right now. Spencer Rattler, his odds are still 4th best at plus 2,500. The Oklahoma quarterback, he's looking okay on paper. The stat line looks decent on paper, not where everyone thought it was going to be. And plus, Oklahoma, I know they're 4-0, but they have struggled against West Virginia. Nearly got upset by Tulane. Same goes for the Nebraska game. And who knows what's going to happen when they have to play Texas next week. Rattler, his odds are there, but at this point, I don't want to say I'm out of the Spencer Rattler business, but I'm certainly out of the business that he's going to be the first quarterback taken in next year's draft. In fact, I don't know how to project. I don't know how to project out next year's draft with the quarterbacks. But Sam Howell at North Carolina has turned it around now, but he hasn't been the same as he was the first 2 years. Rattler's not looking that good. Who knows about Carson Strong over at Nevada? I mean, come on, who knows? Malik Willis at Liberty. So we're gonna save the NFL draft talk. We're gonna save the mock draft talk with these quarterbacks for later in the season and the odds on that. But right now I'm out on Spencer Rattler for the Heisman. I can't totally be out because I know he's gonna pull me back in at some point. At least that's just my gut feeling. But I have to be out of the Spencer Rattler business right now. I can't do it. I cannot be in the Spencer Rattler business at this moment. So plus 2,500. Save your money. Don't put it on him right now. If you're gonna take a bet after week 4, do not put it on Rattler. I don't trust him right now. Oklahoma just has too many holes. Offensive line is struggling a bit. They don't have the stout running game that they should have behind their elite quarterback play, and it's crumbling around him. I mean, aside from Marvin Mims, do they have an elite receiver on that squad? Unless I'm missing something. So I'm out a little bit on the Rattler business. Can't do it. Desmond Ridder, number 3, at plus 1,800. Now, I like this because he's a dual-threat quarterback. This helps, but he plays for Cincinnati. So what does Cincinnati need to do to get a Heisman winner? And, by the way, get into the playoff. Go undefeated. Have a Heisman moment game against Notre Dame today at 2:30. We'll talk about that game in our pick segment actually coming up. Desmond Ridder, I love you. I love my group of 5 teams. Power 6, as they like to say. Because the AAC could be better right now than the ACC or even the Big 12. Desmond Ridder, quarterback of the future Big 12 members, Cincinnati Bearcats, is firmly in the race. Not a bad play, but you're relying on a lot. You're also relying on that team beating Notre Dame today, Ridder keeping his pace up as a passer and a runner, and then probably going undefeated and winning a conference title and being on the doorstep of the playoff as a group of 5 team, which, again, I will believe it when I see it. But he's at plus 1,800. And then the guys that are tied for first, I mentioned them before, and if you missed that, you can go back when this show's on demand and listen to my thoughts on Bryce Young and Matt Corral. Alabama and Ole Miss, respectively, plus 180. That's how much ahead they are of the rest of the pack. Corral's tearing it up. Passer and a runner. Don't forget, he can run too. And Bryce Young, as a freshman quarterback for Alabama, is lighting it up. 15 touchdowns already over 4 games. This dude's on pace for 35 touchdowns. A year after Mac Jones could have won the Heisman, but he was throwing to a guy named Devontae Smith. Amazing. Amazing what Alabama's doing with another offensive coordinator under Nick Saban, this time Bill O'Brien, former Houston Texans and Penn State head coach. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, long shot money, put it on Trevion Henderson, and then add the top 5. I'd say you're probably going to have to ride Corral or Young at this point, but don't rule out Desmond Ridder. You're just depending upon a lot from Cincinnati. So those are your Heisman ranking updates, or Heisman odd updates. All right, we're going to step aside and take one last break on the other side. 5-pack of picks coming up, 15-5 on the season. We have 5 good games to break down today, and we will see if we can go 5-0 once again for the second time in 3 weeks. We were 4-1 last week, almost had back-to-back 5-0 weeks. Let's try to make it our second 5-0 week in 3 weeks and have at least go over 500 once again. We've been over 500 every single week so far this season. Let's keep the train rolling. Keep it locked here. Listen to College Football Pick'em on AM 1490, Sports Betting Radio.
Now back to College Football Pick'em with Nick Kosko, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Final segment of the show here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attilas Gym in Egg Harbor Township. Nick Kosko with you, as always, every Saturday morning, bringing you up to 9 a.m. as we lead you into the kickoff of college football all day long, beginning at noon. Full day. And of course, if you missed the show, you can follow me on Twitter at NickKosko59 and catch the show on demand as well. Tweet it out as soon as the show is done. Show is on demand on YouTube. Just search Nick Kosko59 on Twitter, or you could find my YouTube channel straight away, Nick Kosko on YouTube, and you'll see a bunch of all my other stuff as well from 24/7 Sports, play-by-play highlights, some Rutgers stuff as well. Plenty of highlights and tape to go around, but if you want the show on demand, that is the place to find it. If you missed it, right here this morning on AM 1490. Also home to our good buddy Rich Quinones, Back Your Play, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 4 to 6 on your drive home. Speaking of Rich, he was thrilled to have me on Thursday because I'm on fire. And then those are words coming from his mouth. I'm on fire, on a tear through 4 weeks. And of course, when that happens, usually screech, come to a halt, and go the other way. Slow down. So we'll see if we can keep this pace up, folks. 15-5 on the season, 5-0 and 4-1 in back-to-back weeks. So 9-1 over the last 2 weeks. 90% over the last 2 weeks. When you break the numbers down like that, it certainly sounds much better than a total of 75%, which is still pretty darn good over the first 4 weeks. All right, first game, Arkansas at Georgia. We initially had this one at 18.5, and now the line has shifted to 18 in favor of Georgia. So half a point the one way, but we are still going to take Arkansas plus 18 in this one. It's dependent upon the health of both quarterbacks. Now, I mentioned how I mentioned before with JT Daniels and his Heisman chances and where he sits in the odds in the previous segment, but the way I look at it is he's dealing with a bit of a lat injury, so he's been limited. He's not the same quarterback exactly he was last year just due to that injury. But, you look at what he can bring to the table. Yeah, he can start lighting it up. But the fact that this game is just so big right now, and again, I know it's pretty dependent upon KJ Jefferson's health, the quarterback over at Arkansas. I mean, he makes this offense go. But you still have Traylon Smith in the backfield and Traylon Burks in the receiving game. So I think Arkansas is just too talented on offense to not keep this game close, even if they don't win. At this point, I'm expecting Georgia to win, but that 18 points is just too much for me. Even in Athens, Arkansas coming off an emotional win, neutral site, by the way, over Texas A&M to get into the top 10. They're undefeated as well. So this team is maybe not a complete team, but they are a darn good football team and deserve to be in the top 10 after the first month. So at this moment, folks, at plus 18, we are going to roll with the Arkansas Razorbacks to cover. Let's see what happens. That's going to be quite the game at noon, by the way. How about that? A noon kickoff for that one. Arkansas and Georgia. Oof. Just a good old-fashioned SEC matchup. Cross-division. Oh, that's college football right there in Athens. All right. Michigan at Wisconsin is our next game. This line is not shifted as far as we could tell. Wisconsin is still a 2-point favorite at home, practically a pick 'em, but we are going to pick Michigan here at +2. I'm just actually surprised Michigan is not a road favorite. Now, the only reason why I say, or the only reason why they couldn't be a road favorite here is because Camp Randall Stadium in Madison, Wisconsin, is one of the best home field advantages in college football. Wisconsin has rarely lost there over the last 10 years. I believe it's less than 10 losses. It might be 10 now because they lost to Penn State earlier this year. But I'm pretty sure if it's not 10 exactly, they've lost about 8 or 9 games over the last 10 years at this place. So we're talking about one loss a season. That's it, and they already had it. so the way I look at it, take Michigan. Michigan to me is the better football team. Now, I may be propping up my Rutgers Scarlet Knights, by the way, who gave Michigan a run for their money in Ann Arbor last week. Now, obviously, Rutgers plays Ohio State today, and that line's at 15 in favor of Ohio State on the road, so who knows what's going to happen there. We're not picking that game today, but all I can say is go Scarlet Knights. Good teams win. Great teams cover. We'll see what happens. But for Michigan, yeah, it was a little concerning. They couldn't score in the second half last week. They couldn't even get a first down to the fourth quarter. That is a little concerning, but their run game is just too good. Blake Corum, Hassan Haskins, and if need be, Cade McNamara could be a decent quarterback. I mean, he's been solid so far. This offense is not predicated on airing it out like they wanted to. And I know they haven't had Ronnie Bell since, I believe, week 1 of the season. So they're missing their best receiver, so that they're going to run through the ground. But they do have some solid options in the passing game. The defense is really good. Special teams has been very good. And for Wisconsin folks, Graham Mertz has been horrible. I mean, I'm talking about horrible. 1 touchdown, 6 picks. Only 556 yards. This guy's completing just over 50% of his passes in 3 games this year. He's taken a huge step back. I mean, this guy was God's gift after destroying Illinois last year in opening night. Then he goes on the COVID list, out 2 games. Wisconsin has a couple games canceled. And then Mertz is not the same last year. And this year he's not been the same at all. They're missing Jack Cohn now, who's lighting it up for Notre Dame, who transferred out of the program after last year because they elected to go with Mertz. So I don't trust them. I know it's in Madison, and this could very well be the bounce-back game they need, but the way Michigan is playing this year, this Michigan team I think is going to be in the thick of things for the Big Ten title until the end. And I'm talking about until the final week of the year when they play Ohio State. This could be the year they beat Ohio State, but of course they also have to beat Penn State and Michigan State to get there first. But the challenges start today. Let's get a win over Wisconsin. We'll go with Michigan +2. They're a road dog. That's fine. But like I said, practically a pick 'em. So if they happen to lose this game by 2, it's a push, or they lose by 1 on some freak play or a last-second field goal, we'll win anyway. But I'll take Michigan to win outright anyway. +2 on the road at Wisconsin. All right, Minnesota and Purdue is another interesting game. Now, we initially had this one at -2.5 for Purdue, and it's stayed there. So the line's not shifted. Minnesota's horrible. They're 2-2, but they're horrible. You lose to Bowling Green. You put on a dud of a performance like that. I mean, I'm going to call you horrible, at least for 1 week. All right. Again, this could, usually when teams lose games like that, they go down a spiral, or they're going to bounce back the next week and blow out their next opponent, whether it's home or away. But they're on the road. Purdue is more solid than I thought they were going to be this year. They're 3-1. They have good quarterback play right now, and with Jack Plummer lighting it up, 7 touchdowns, 840 yards, high completion percentage. David Bell, you want to talk about Rondale Moore tearing it up for Purdue, and now he's doing well for the Arizona Cardinals as a rookie. David Bell could be better pure receiver. 21 catches, 319 yards, 3 touchdowns. Purdue's offense, I think, is just too much right now for Minnesota. Minnesota has a good ground game. They lost Muhammad Ibrahim in the first game of the year. This guy was this guy was in the running for best running back in the country. Has a great game against Ohio State, but tears his Achilles in the first game against Ohio State. Trayson Potts fills in, folks. This guy is averaging almost 5 yards a carry. He's got 5 touchdowns. It's not the run game. It's Taylor Morgan, the quarterback. Taking a huge step back over the last 2 years. He's tremendously regressed. In 2019, this guy's throwing 30 touchdowns, over 3,000 yards, and Minnesota's on the doorstep of a Big Ten title game. They've regressed. I don't trust Minnesota. This line, I'm surprised it's not bigger for Purdue because Minnesota's coming off a terrible loss, and it's in West Lafayette. But what do I know? I'm not Vegas. Purdue minus 2.5. I will take the Boilermakers to win this one pretty handily. All right, we have Texas at TCU. And I mentioned before how the Red River Showdown is coming up next week. That's the big game. But before they have to get there, Oklahoma has to avoid the trap game of Kansas State, and Texas has to avoid the trap game of TCU. It's funny. They're both playing on the road this week, or today, before the Red River Showdown, and it's against teams that have given them absolute fits over the last few years. I think Texas has won one of the last 7 matchups against TCU, and Oklahoma's lost 2 straight against Kansas State. Wild game. This line has actually shifted the other way to TCU. Money is going to TCU to cover at home. They were plus 5 dogs at home. Now it's 4. Texas is only a 4-point favorite, which gives us all the more indication to keep rolling with the Longhorns here. I think the Longhorns are going to avoid the trap game this week. They've kind of figured it out on offense now with Casey Thompson at quarterback. Bijan Robinson is still a darn good running back, and I think he can get himself back in the Heisman conversation as well. So we're going to roll with Texas, minus 4 on the road at TCU. Final game, Cincinnati at Notre Dame. Cincinnati, when we gave our pick to our good buddy Rich Quinones, it was minus 1.5, and I believe that's still the line. It's now shifted 2, folks. That's a big shift. I know it's only half a point, but we have to note it, and we're still going to roll with Cincinnati, the road favorite at Notre Dame. I just think this is Cincinnati's year to really make some noise, and even if they don't make the playoff, I could see them going undefeated and being number 5 and being on the outside looking in and saying, well, I guess we do have to join the Big 12 to get into the playoff eventually. But I think Desmond Ridder is the better quarterback in this matchup, even if it is Jack Cohn for Notre Dame, but Drew Pine might be in there as well, so we're not really sure what's going to happen. This is at 2:30. It's going to be a fascinating game, one of the best games of the weekend, but right now we're going to roll with Cincinnati minus 2. So quick recap, Arkansas plus 18, Michigan plus 2, Purdue minus 2.5, Texas minus 4, and Cincinnati minus 2 are our 5 picks this week for week 5. Let's try to go 5-0 again, folks. That's going to do it for me. You've been listening to College Football Pick'em. I'm Nick Kosko, right here on AM 1490, Sports Betting Radio.